today I will be presenting on deaf culture in America and Nepal. So there are very different cultures. In America, there are 328.2 million people total, approximately, and around 600,000 of them are deaf. Nepal is a much smaller country. It's about the size of Tennessee. It has 28.61 million people, and around 300,000 of them are deaf. So these are very different cultures, as I mentioned. So they have very different beliefs as to why someone is deaf. So in American culture, people are deaf because of genetic or environmental reasons. They had an accident, they were just born deaf, they got sick. So that's what the general public thinks of why someone became deaf, which is true. In Nepal, they are influenced heavily by Hindu culture and Hindu beliefs, and so they believe that if you are deaf, it's a punishment for a sin you did in your past life or you have really bad karma. So deafness is very much stigmatized and looked down on. So with these comes appropriate language in each spoken language. In America, it is impolite to say hearing impaired because that implies that something needs to be fixed, and it disregards deaf culture. Similarly, in Nepali culture, the term lato literally means deaf and dumb, and it implies a lack of communication and intelligence. So instead of saying those, you can say deaf or hard of hearing because it recognizes deaf culture and it doesn't imply that deafness is a disability. Or in Nepali, they have the term bahiro, which is, it has a much more positive connotation of deaf. It's a newer term, so it's mostly used by the younger generation. So with that, those are for the spoken languages. You then have sign languages in both countries. You have American Sign Language, which was derived from French Sign Language and was started by Lauren Clare in 1817, but it wasn't recognized as an actual language until the 1960s. Then you have Nepali Sign Language, which is in the same language family as Pakistani Sign Language and Indian Sign Language. Most deaf Nepalis use home signs instead of NSL, but NSL was started by the Central Secondary School for the Deaf in 1966. Both countries have very different attitudes towards deafness. So in America, it's more toned down. Deafness is seen as a physical condition and not a culture, which is very bad, and deaf culture needs to be recognized as its own individual culture. There's also the subconscious mindset that the ability to use spoken language is correlated with intelligence. That leads to ignorance or rude responses towards deaf workers and their capabilities. But they're not concerned, like the hearing people aren't concerned about eating food made by deaf, which is a big problem in Nepal. Sign language is looked down on by hearing Nepali, and here we have art by a deaf Nepali artist showing there's a boy who is deaf and his parents are telling him to be quiet, and he doesn't know why, and all these people are around, and they're just talking and everything. And then it shows an alternative situation in which the family is signing to one another, and everyone around them is looking at them, and they're yelling at them, and like completely shocked, because again, deafness is very much looked down on. Also, deaf people are frequently shunned and hidden, especially in the villages. If a deaf person serves food, it's seen as polluted, so hearing people won't eat there. There are, however, schools for the deaf in both countries. So in America, the American School for the Deaf was founded in 1817. Sign language was frequently used until it was banned in 1880, and oralism became the primary method. After the 1960s, ASL was proved an actual language, so it was incorporated back into schooling, and teaching methods now vary. Oralism is still around. There's also total communication, SimCom, bilingual, bimodal. Lots of different ones. Schools use different ones. In Nepal, schools were originally oral, and then it switched to total communication in 1985, and now they use mostly total communication and SimCom. Most deaf children have no language when they start school, and about 74% of teachers for the deaf are hearing. They do have a law, however, saying that deaf children have a right to education, which is very good. And they can have access to education from elementary all the way up through university. So there is access to them in sign language. Activism is very important, especially just as part of American culture as a whole. So there are deaf-run businesses. There's a deaf-friendly Starbucks that's near Gallaudet University. There's also the Deaf President Now rally in 1988, which was a big movement at Gallaudet, and they were fighting to have a deaf president at the university, and they won, and it was this massive deal for deaf rights. And I also have a picture of the Dahulgari Deaf Residential School, which has around 300 students. It's one of the schools in Nepal. And that's it.